I'm very excited to introduce our Christopher Sebastian, who is joining us this year. We first had him last year. He gave a wonderful talk. Christopher is a journalist, a technical writer, and digital media specialist who uses pop culture, media studies, political science, and social psychology to examine human relationships with other animals. He's a director of social media for Peace Advocacy Network. He's a senior fellow at the Sentient Media and co-founder of VGN. And he has also lectured at Columbia University in the Department of Social Work. He's given many talks on a wide variety of issues and topics, and I do think he's particularly talented at analyzing media and culture. And I'm very thrilled he could come back to join us at this year's Speak for Wolves, and I really hope we can get him to come back for future ones too. So please take it away, Christopher.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you all to all of the organizers for having me here again. I really appreciate it, and I really love doing the Speak for Wolves conference. So this is exciting for me. I am in Prague. I'm in the Czech Republic. Although I obviously don't have a Czech accent, I am from the USA. So my time zone is a little bit different, but nonetheless, I'm here, and I'm really I really appreciate the organizers for giving me this early time slot. Of course, it means that I have to set the tone or set the pace for the rest of the day. So I hope I do a good job. Anyway, I am going to share my screen now. And I will also turn off my camera so that you're paying attention to the presentation and not watching my lovely face right here. And I am not able to participate in screen sharing at this time yet. Hopefully I'll be promoted to one of the star positions where I'll be able to do that. I don't know who has control right now and who will be able to confer that wonderful ability onto me.
Amanda will take care of it. I'm sure she's working on it.
Yes, did. Sorry about that.
It's cool. It's already done. That was super fast. All right. So share sound, optimize for video clips. I have a really short 15-minute presentation. I am gonna, please move this window away. Okay. There we go. Sorry. From beginning. There we go. All right, now we have it. I've got a short 15-minute presentation. It's called Fido for President, Dogs and Politics. This is actually modeled on a previous presentation that I had done called Political Animals, because I had written my thesis on animal symbolism and US political discourse. And there is actually a lot to be said about that. If you want to watch a full presentation on that, I did one in, I think, February or March of 2020, right before the start of the pandemic for United Poultry Concerns in Berkeley, California. And that's on YouTube. So you can find that, if you scroll around on the internet and you got some time on your hands and you just wanted to find out more about it. But in particular, I wanted to focus on one particular aspect of this work, the canine aspect, because since I had done the initial presentation and in doing the research for my thesis, I discovered that so much of what we learned about dogs in the political discourse, is transferable to or can be used to describe the situation of their canine relatives, the wolf. And so, so this is Fido for President, Dogs and Politics. And can I actually advance my slides? There we go. The previous presentation that this was actually taken from was called Political Animals, Animal Symbolism and American Politics. So let's just talk about it. Let's jump in. One of the first examples that I wanted to use was from recent political elections. If you're participating in this conference in the USA, you may actually recognize these two people. This is Senator Raphael Warnock, a Democratic representative in Georgia. In January of 2020, he actually faced off against Kelly Loeffler, who was his Republican/conservative opponent in the Georgia senatorial runoff election. And there was a lot going on in this election. And in particular, there was actually a tremendous amount of animal symbolism. We won't get into all of it, but one particular aspect of it had to do with dogs in particular. This is an article from the New York Times called How Alvin the Beagle Helped Usher in a Democratic Senate. I was going to write about this myself, but the New York Times had scooped me, and I'm not entirely unhappy about that because they did a really good analysis of it. It says here, Senator Raphael Warnock was sworn in this week as Georgia's first Black senator, and he arrived with a canny canine assist. And I just wanted to take a look at the actual political ad itself. It's about a 30-second spot, and then we are going to take just a couple of minutes to talk about all of the things that were discovered in that ad, or all of the things that we can unpack from that ad. And so I'm going to silence myself and start the video.
We told them the smear ads were coming, and that's exactly what happened. You would think that Kelly Loeffler might have something good to say about herself if she really wants to represent Georgia. Instead, she's trying to scare people by taking things I've said out of context from over 25 years of being a pastor. But I think Georgians will see her ads for what they are. Don't you? I'm Raphael Warnock, and we approve this message. We told them to...
All right, so that's the ad. And there is, like I said, so much to unpack from it. But before I get into my own little analyses, I wanted to share what the New York Times had actually said. In their article, they had written, oops, can I advance it? There we go. While there's no singular factor responsible for victories this narrow, Mr. Warnock won by less than 100,000 votes out of roughly 4.5 million. And the other new Democratic Senator, John Ossoff, won by even less. There is bipartisan agreement that the Beagle played an outsized role in cutting through the clutter in two contests that broke every Senate spending record. And then they went on to say, in a separate part of the article, there's been discussion that the Beagle, the kind of breed we psychologically associate with white people, as Dr. Jefferson put it, was another subtle yet intentional effort to explode racial stereotypes. Mr. Magnus said the reality was more mundane. The dog needed to be very cute, somewhat relatable, and he needed to be able to hold the dog. And there's so much truth here, racial stereotypes and the associations that we make with animals and humans, especially with dogs, are they can't be ignored. Although people are often in the animal rights community very popular for saying that politics has absolutely nothing to do with animal rights. This is just a clear example of how that's absolutely not true. Our relationships with other animals are directly inform our politics, and the symbolic use of animals actually says a lot about us as individuals. Usually when we think about Black people and persons from the canine family, we think about specific breeds of dogs that we associate with violence. There are popular stereotypes around pit bulls, with Michael Vick, with dog fighting, with German Shepherds or Rottweilers, or dogs that are used for protection. To actually see a Black man using a small dog that you can pick up that looks friendly and that has all of these positive associations was enormously important for the Warnock campaign. Also, it's really important that he didn't specifically focus on the dog himself in the ad. The dog was used as a political prop while he was saying his spiel, or speaking his script. And at the end, what we see, we actually saw a Black man who was picking up after his dog. This makes him immediately relatable to middle-class white voters that would make him more comfortable to this particular class of people. But it's not just limited to senatorial races. We actually see a long history of the use of dogs in political campaigns, and not just in campaigning. After people are elected, dogs and persons, again, of the canine family are enormously important to politicians. This image is actually a picture of Joe Biden's dog. His new dog, I might add, named Commander. Commander is a puppy that was actually given to him by his brother and sister-in-law. Commander was he was just given I think 5 days before Christmas. This is important because he's not Joe Biden's only German Shepherd. This is a photograph of Joe Biden's other dog, Major. And if you've been following political news in in the year 2022, Major was actually Joe Biden's dog that he had adopted in 2018 with his wife, Jill Biden. And you see that, he's at the shelter right now. And it's so ironic that he's sitting in front of a sign that says making friends for life, when in fact, this was not a lifetime commitment. Joe Biden and Joe Biden had dumped their German Shepherd that was gotten from a rescue because he was biting people in the White House. And that's not good. Like oftentimes, like what dogs do in particular for politicians and especially for presidents is they lend a type of political capital to the politician. When there is a presidential dog, like that person in office is thought of as caring, thoughtful, trustworthy, approachable. These are the qualities that we associate with a person through the dog. And the dogs themselves symbolize friendship, loyalty, bravery, and respect. These are the qualities that dogs actually carry themselves that are supposedly transferable, or like, you know, they use their social capital or political capital to boost the profile of the politician in question. And like when Joe Biden actually dumped his shelter dog for for a puppy, a full breed puppy, no less, that has implications for dogs as well, particularly shelter animals, because they already struggle with the public perception of being otherwise disposable. And to like actually get a full breed dog who is a puppy reinforces the idea that puppies are more desirable than adult dogs, and that there's probably something wrong with a dog that you get from a shelter versus a dog that you get from a breeder. This isn't this isn't meant to be a value judgment against Joe Biden as a politician, but this is just a reflection of what the political reality is and stakes are for animals in the White House. If your dog is a biter, well, that dog is really not good for your image. And so they very quietly, or perhaps not so quietly, actually, I apologize if there is some instability here. I just got a note that said that my internet connection is unstable. So if you've got some listening issues, definitely put it in the chat. Let me know. I will slow down, or I will try to do what I can to accommodate. I already turned off my camera. Hopefully that's enough. But in any case, this is an image of Joe Biden with his new dog on the beach as well, which also indicates to us that this should be thought of as a candid shot. But again, there's nothing candid that happens in politics. Every minute, every second, possibly, of a president's schedule is is accounted for. So he didn't just show up on a beach to throw a ball with a dog. Presidential photographer have. Also, if people want to drop messages into the chat while I'm talking, I definitely don't mind. It lets me know that you're paying attention. If you've got questions, if you've got things that you wanted to address, if you've got points of observation you wanted to bring up, definitely do that. I think that it makes for a better discussion, and it makes me feel less like I'm just preaching to people who are on the other side of the internet and imbuing knowledge to you. This should be an exchange of information and something that's pretty informal and so yeah, definitely throw questions into the Q&A. But yeah, I apologize if this keeps happening. So sharing again. Now people can see my application. So I'm going to finish up really fast, just in case this happens a third time. Yeah, talking about the implications for our family. I actually had dove into this to see what political what will represent as political skills in US discourse and in international discourse as well, because it's not limited to the United States. And before I searched for very long, I actually discovered that wolf attacks predict far-right voting. This was a study that had been conducted by researchers at Columbia University. And they used difference in difference models to find that wolf attacks are accompanied by a significant rise in far-right voting behavior. And then the researchers actually explored potential mechanisms for this by analyzing Twitter posts, election manifestos, Facebook ads, to show that far-right politicians frame the wolf as a threat to economic livelihoods. And I had married this to the previous research that I had done that indicated all of the things that we have about Americans and who is considered to be a true American, and how that's embodied. Research was done on the German AfD, that's the Alternative for Deutschland Party in Germany. And so the researchers had tried to reproduce that for the United States, and what they have found that there is evidence that there's correlation to this as well when they had researched it in Minnesota. Now, this was done in 2022, but it is by no means new. Oh, I see. Like there are comments here. But Rachel's saying that like my neighbors must be streaming rom-coms or something. Like it's been like this all afternoon, which is really, really frustrating because I had great internet all weekend. And then we've got Linda saying that like I would say the Major was rehomed and not dumped, which sounds like they just turned him out on the street. Rehoming Major was for his protection as well as others. The White House was not a calm environment for him. This should be the take-home message. And this is absolutely true. Major was rehomed. I would disagree that like, that rehoming and not dumped is the like, is the narrative that like we should take away from it. Because like if in fact we look at the timeline of this, and just to back up about Major really quickly, looking at the timeline of it, like that dog was adopted in 2018. In 2018, Joe Biden and Jill Biden knew for absolute certain that they were running for president. They had ample opportunity to get to know this dog before he was actually brought to the house, and they knew that he was not the good fit for the environment. So the narrative that the White House actually put out in part through their press secretary and in part through the rest of the media ecosystem that we live in is that like, oh, this was for the dog's protection. But if it was truly for the dog's protection, it would have actually been done before it got to the point that he was biting an average of a person every week. And they were hiding this also as like further reports that come out through entirely credible news sources like NBC News, like NPR, and others like that said that this had been an ongoing problem for them. So like it was not like the dog's best interests that were actually being taken care of or like actually being considered in the moment or like, or leading up to this moment, as I would say. He was in fact rehomed, but like that was like, it was not actually, it's not a decision that I would say was made, again, for the dog. It was made for the persons who were benefiting from the political capital. And unfortunately, you actually don't know what type of dog is going to be successful in a White House environment. And they ended up getting another puppy that they did not choose themselves, but was actually given to them at present. And I do understand that, like Linda saying that they were giving him a chance and they did some training toward the end. Absolutely did do some training. And it is fair to say that they were giving him a chance. Yeah, they had ample opportunity. Like if people in White House have with all of the resources that they've got, have got this much time and money and opportunity to understand their canine friend or family member, if someone with this type of incredible access to resources can't actually get to know their animal or their animal companion within 3 years before they actually get to this point, what does that actually say? And in fact, all of the points that Linda is raising, I brought up myself, and I actually addressed myself in a blog post on my website, and I'll link that in the comments so that we can actually have that further discussion after the presentation is finished. But insofar as wolves themselves, like I said, although this was done for the AFD in Germany and again this was actually reproduced in Minnesota, it's also not new. On the next slide here, if I can advance to it, this is an image of former Governor Sarah Palin and also former contender for the vice presidency in 2012. She's a huge fan of aerial hunting, particularly for wolves. And this is actually a quote from a political ad: using a low-flying plane, they kill in winter when there is no way to escape. Riddled with gunshots biting at their backs in agony, they die of brutal death. And Palin even encouraged that cruelty by proposing a $150 bounty, only $150 for the severed foreleg of each killed wolf. There were several images of this on the internet, by the way, which I did not want to include in the presentation, and then introduce the bill to make the killing easier. So there is so much to be said for the long history of of the scapegoating of wolves in US political discourse and the symbolic use of animals altogether. And I actually gave a name to this. The name that I gave it is therio-nationalism. Therio-nationalism describes the symbolic use, distribution, and consumption of animals and products derived from animal origin in order to create and sustain the emotive power of national attachment. Therio-nationalism is characterized by weaponization, glorification, objectification, exploitation, and projection. The ways in which this actually occurs. And so why is all of this important? It's important because like we project so much of ourselves as humans, and especially in Western society, onto animals. Use animals like, as proxies for understanding our moral agency, for understanding our emotional state, and for like understanding our own mortality. Domination over animals or other animals is particularly, again, my internet is acting unstable, so I'm hoping that you all can still hear me. Oh, wow. Rachel actually found my blog post, and she put it there to save me the trouble of doing it a little bit later on. So yeah, like that part is done, so people can actually ask questions.
So how do you think you mentioned that certain breeds of dogs, like pit bulls and whatnot, get a bad rap, and I would I don't want to say assume, but of course, we've seen that wolves obviously are categorized by many anyway in that, quote unquote bad group. And also fetishized by some. So it's a very interesting juxtaposition.
I didn't want I didn't have time because I only wanted to do this for 15 minutes, but the fetishization also is something that occurs quite frequently. It's absolutely wild, especially by people. This is the thing, I don't want to I don't want to equalize between political parties or political affiliation. Attitudes toward animals are already baked into partisanship in the United States and in US political discourse. But the way that it presents in in different groups along the political spectrum is super interesting. And fetishization is something that actually is equally harmful and is often done by people who are on the left of the political spectrum as well. Sorry. Linda was saying, what was the point with the Trump slide? I don't think you elaborated on that, and it was up for just a second. Yeah, because I started to lose, I started to lose connection again at that point, and I panicked. What I was saying was that it's the absence of dogs or of people in the canine family as well that should be addressed and should be recognized. And in Trump's case, the absence of having a dog was actually it was a huge gaping hole in a trend that had existed in US political discourse for 130 years. And and was very noticeable because he didn't have a dog. And because all of the virtues that we associate with dog quote ownership were not being applied to Donald Trump. And he very openly and very explicitly said he didn't need it. He didn't need that social capital because all of those qualities that a dog confers upon a political actor of being caring, thoughtful, approachable, and trustworthy, were not things that people were actually voting for Trump for anyway. And so that's just an interesting observation in the use of animals or the absence of animals as well in the political in the political world.
Can you see Sunny's question in the Q&A? She's got a good one.
Oh, let me see. Do you think it's necessary to decouple politics and human-animal relationships, perception, management, or is there a healthy, productive way to keep politics and wildlife, human-animal relationships, et cetera, intertwined? I think it's extremely necessary to to keep it to keep these things intertwined. Decoupling them, I don't even think is possible. Number one, because decoupling them would inevitably lead to furthering the narrative. In my opinion, this is just me speculating now. I would say that it would inevitably lead to reinforcing the idea that humans ourselves are not animals and that we somehow exist separate from everyone else in the animal kingdom or in animal communities. And in fact, multi-species justice is extremely, extremely necessary, and and it should be recognized as a reality for us, rather than trying to frame multi-species justice as something that is separate from human justice or justice in human communities, because we're all in this together. We all have to live and perhaps die on this planet based on the actions of humans. There was another question that seemed like it went away. I didn't see it before it did. But thank you so much for that one, Jasmine.
It was a question about where they can support you. So I posted the Patreon, your Patreon link. I'll paste it in the chat as well.
Oh my God, that's like, I really appreciate that. Yeah. Oh, Linda was saying Trump did make a big deal out of the military dog involved in the terrorism raid, and Melania acted like she was a holy smokes. That is so absolutely true. And it's something I didn't even bother to touch on. And I'm really glad that you brought that up. Oh, Linda is owning. She's absolutely like dominating in the comment section here. I'm so grateful for like her participating. I often wonder if the extreme cruelty meted out to wolves is because we can't control them like dogs, and therefore it challenges our supremacy. That's gold star for Linda. Girl, like, listen, like there's a psychological phenomenon called terror management theory. And like one of the aspects of terror management theory is, again, is predicated on humans being faced with our own mortality. And like, and one of the ways that we try to mitigate that, or our our feelings toward our own mortality, is human domination over other species. And like in particular, like wild animals, which is why like wild animal populations have been reduced to like single digit percentages, I believe, like in recent years, which is absolutely terrifying. And wolves are like such easy political targets. And that is so absolutely true. And so it does challenge our supremacy. Human exceptionalism is one of the things that that we are like that we hold as this sort of truism, like this absolutism, and it's false. Just like everything else, it's socially constructed. So I'm really glad that she said that. Anybody else? We can totally wrap up at any time, because like I have no idea what's going to happen next with the internet. Although it seems super stable with my phone connection now, but like.
Please, folks, don't. You can chat and post questions in the chat. So please ask away if you have comments or questions. As you can see, Christopher loves to answer them.
Last year, like my presentation for Speak for Wolves was actually on wolf mythology throughout history, from like around the Romantic period, in fairy tales through like modern times. So through like the 17th century, through the 20th century, like the use of wolves in, like I said, in fairy tales, in like books, in the cinema, and like particularly like werewolves. So like, the wolves have been around for so long, and the way that we actually use wolves biblically, from like, so all types of like literature and all types of imagery and iconography, like it's fascinating to me. And like for me as a media studies scholar, like actually looking at this from a political perspective was like enormously important. And Linda saying, I wonder why the concept of freedom doesn't resonate with wolves and the right more, as they seem to like to make a big deal out of freedom. And that's so true, because like my interpretation of that is that like at least in the US, and I can't like broadly apply this to everywhere, because I don't have like the breadth of knowledge to actually speak on all throughout the West, or even in the global South. But in the US, the concept of freedom is very different, or it exists very differently for people on the right and on the political left. On the right, people sort of interpret freedom as freedom to, like the freedom to do things. Like I need the freedom to do whatever I want, go wherever I want, and not be restricted or have any restrictions imposed upon me. And on the political left, you have freedom from persecution, freedom from violence, freedom to, I don't know, not go to school and get shot by a gun. The perceptions of freedom are very different, depending on who you're talking to and what the audience is. I think that the concept of freedom as it exists on the right, doesn't really resonate, because their perception of freedom, the way that it is understood, it's freedom to do something, irrespective of what the consequences are, if that makes sense. And in particular, like the freedom to like farm animals and to exploit farmed animals, and and have these captive breeding programs exist in almost direct opposition to like free living animals, such as wolves in particular. And so, wolves are viewed, are demonized ever so frequently as like the enemy. And like when you hold them up in opposition to the, like, you know, the American family unit or the American farmer, and like the freedom to do certain things. And so that's like, you know, oh, Sharon, she actually has a question: man's best friend versus big bad wolf in European culture versus Native American culture. Wow. That's literally a whole presentation unto itself. Like we can absolutely talk about that, like, you know, like very, very broadly, 4 hours. Like, you know, the use, like the use of wolves as symbols in Native American culture is like, you know, it's not something that I am particularly very well versed on. I could speak personally, like, you know, like in much more detail about like the idea of like man's best friend, the domestication of wolves in like, you know, in European, Western European and in like US American culture. But yeah, like that is such a huge topic that absolutely needs to be unpacked. Steph is asking, what's the culture like around wildlife conservation in Prague? It is a staunchly political like it is in the US? Is there an anti-wildlife pro-poaching stance like here? And can you address hunting as conservation? Woo-wee! Al is asking that question. Like, I would say that like hunting is absolutely not conservation. And I will get challenged on that. And I will like fight back against that perception all day. I'm working backwards here because like, you know, like actually there is a post, Rachel, if you can find this as well on my blog, that talks about hunting in particular, and like, you know, and especially like trophy hunting. And US Americans insofar as like you know what it looks like and the implications of it. Like basically, like, you know, I think that the US FWS, that's the US Fish and Wildlife Service, they had done some research around this, and I think 2016 was the most recent report that I had read. I'm sure there's probably a more recent report that has been done since then. And I'm speaking on this, like, you know, as a person who has worked on integrated resources, natural resources management plans, cultural resources, natural management plans, like, you know, like environmental impact statements for like 10 years for US federal government agencies. And like, you know, the US FWS being one of those agencies, they had done like an actual breakdown of hunting in the United States. Hunting is something that is largely done for pleasure, point blank. It is something that's carried out by people who are primarily white, who actually have a lot of money. And the reason why this is important is like, you know, it is because like we often talk about hunting, like hunting, for people who are incredibly poor, hunting as like a cultural practice for like Native Americans. And I think that like Native Americans in that most recent report actually account for like fewer than 5% of the hunting population. And people who are living in extreme poverty, who are like, you know, doing subsistence hunting in order for them to survive, make up an equally small percentage. And hunting, like, you know, as an industry brings in like upwards of like $5 billion a year. And like, so the people that are doing it aren't carrying out some sort of solemn duty. They're actually just like engaging in something that they think of as fun. As a conservation measure, it actually doesn't really work out. And in the instances where hunting does work out, it's because we've actually engineered the, like, you know, we have physically engineered the ecological system in that region in such a way for hunting to be necessary in order for like human populations to actually thrive. So like, you know, like, but yeah, like Steph's question about like the culture around wildlife conservation in the Czech Republic, which is currently where I live, I can't really speak to that because I have like, you know, like I like full disclosure here. Like as of this year, I actually accepted a research fellowship at Anglo-American University in Prague here, and like, you know, with a focus on nationalism and identity politics in specific relationship to animals and our relationships to other animals. So this is something that I absolutely plan to be researching in the future. But throughout Western Europe, like, yeah, like, you know, hunting being political, it absolutely is. That study that I had that I included in my presentation, and I'll put a link to that into the comments as well after we're done, so that you all can read it yourselves. That is just like one example of like, you know, and that was just done in 2022 of how deeply, deeply political hunting is in like, you know, in Germany as like one country, which is adjacent to the Czech Republic. Germany is just a little bit north of us. So Rachel is absolutely on it. She's very good at this. Like, I need to hire Rachel as my super spy. So like she's exceptionally good at like digging up these blog posts. Let me see if I can find that study as well. I think that I brought it up specifically for these purposes. Ah, absolutely. Here it is. Copy. And pasting it into the chat. There we go. And the study was done by TNAS. Cha-cha-cha. There we go. What else we got? More questions as I move my phone around? Holy smokes. Linda's saying, before I leave, can we see my puppy that appears to be lounging in the background? He absolutely is. Hang on one second. I love showing him off, so thank you for asking and giving me an opportunity to do exactly that. This is my dog right here. And now he's looking at the camera. Man, this is Kid B, AKA Kitten Beans. He is 12 years old, and he is a Jack Russell mix that I actually adopted from a friend who found him on the street here in Prague about 3 years ago. So like now he lives with me. He's completely useless. He just like shows up in the background and zoom bombs. He zoom bombs me. I didn't even realize he was back there. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. That was really great. And you left us just enough time for a quick little break if no one else has any other questions, but that was wonderful as always. I really enjoy your talks, and I'm gonna have to get you back for that, the one about fact checking and media, because I think that still remains my favorite. So I'll do more of that, but.
I absolutely love that one. Like, yeah, like fact checking and digital media literacy, especially for animal rights advocacy, is like, it's for me, it's hugely, hugely important, because the number of like memes or videos or like, or general misinformation and propaganda that we put out, and not all propaganda is bad, but like, but when it is put out with misinformation, like it discredits us, and it really, really harms us in like, in unimaginable and really unintentional ways. And so like being able to like fact check and just be the most media savvy and media literate people that we can be absolutely empowers us to do a much better job representing ourselves and representing other species, and just like overall like promoting multi-species justice, which is like, to me, the most important thing.